Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 7 of Psych.
If you guys are enjoying the show, please remember to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. There's a lot of people out there that like Psych that you may not know, so share.
As of today's date, the 20th of May, we currently don't have any new information about the Psych movie. We definitely see that it's definitely guaranteed now. Other actors and stuff have posted about it, but we don't have any new information on plot or anything like that. So keep
Yeah.
keep in touch for that.
We want to shout out to the official Psych Fanatics of Facebook group, which we are both a part of. It's an amazing, amazing group. Many of our new listeners are part of this group, and we appreciate that support so much. Love that group. Okay, so this episode is titled Who You Gonna Call? A nod to Ghostbusters, by the way. It aired originally on August 18th, 2006. It was written by Steve Franks, Carrie Lenhart, John J. Sakmar, Anupam Nigam, and Tammy Sager.
All right, and Barb, can you give us the synopsis for this week's episode?
Absolutely. So after learning that a doctor was killed, Sean and Gus try to get on the case. After Lassie tells them to get lost, they get a client of their own that says he's being haunted. The guys take the case, and it ends up intertwining with the doctor's murder. So once again, Sean helps Lassie and Jules solve the murder. I will say, because, not my favorite episode. I know that you're usually the guy saying, it's not my favorite. This one's not my favorite. I tend to like the episodes where they're all sort of working on the same thing at the same time and know they're working on the same thing. And I will say too, I didn't like that there wasn't much of Henry in this one. We got him in the intro, but I really like Henry in the episodes. I think it sort of like fills out the cast a little bit better when when everybody's sort of involved. The one thing that I did like about this episode is that we got to see a little bit more of Lassiter's personality coming out in several different ways. So, and we'll talk about those as we go through the show, but I really did like seeing that. But yeah, all in all, not my favorite episode.
That's actually a good point. That's one thing that I didn't notate was about Henry. He's one of those characters that like you notice him when he's gone, but when he's there, he's a side character.
Mhm.
It's a weird balance where you do miss having him there and his interactions with Sean. As far as the episode goes, I thought it was enjoyable, but it's not my favorite. I thought the case was interesting, and due to its nature, it led to twists and
Mhm.
connections. So I did like the path of clues that were dropped along the way. I did like, again, like you mentioned, the Lassiter, some of the backstory, but it did feel like, I guess maybe because of the complexity of the case, that it drowned out some of the character
Mhm.
interaction. Like it seemed like more than half of the focus was on the case and specifically like the Robert character
Mhm.
than on the rest of the characters. And like Juliet, I feel like didn't even get that much screen time here. She had a few scenes where she mostly
Yeah.
walked in and introduced people, but she didn't really say much in this episode. Although I did notice some differences with Juliet, but
Yeah,
we'll talk
and there
about
were
that
some
whenever it comes
key
up.
interactions. There were some key interactions that Juliet had. So yeah,
Yeah, there just
I'm
wasn't as much silliness in this
yeah,
episode,
that's
which
true.
I kind of miss. I love that's kind of their thing. There was a
Mhm.
few episodes. It wasn't without it. There was a few parts
Right.
that I was dying and like rewatched again.
Mhm.
Um, but it was definitely less than normal episodes.
And I will give you the complexity of the story. You were saying like the complexity of the story provided for twists and turns. And I will say, if I was a first time viewer of this, obviously I've seen this episode a lot,
Yeah,
being a Psych fan.
I had to
Um,
factor that in too.
yeah, and I will say, I wish I could remember the very first time that I watched it, but 2006, and I'm old. But I really don't think that I necessarily would have caught on very quickly that the
These
the
were
the
connected.
end result that was connected. Right.
Mhm.
They did a good job with it.
I was trying to think about that too. I was like, did I remember? Like, do I remember? Would this is
Uh-huh.
something that I would have known ahead of time?
Hmm.
And I don't know if I would have, especially not until at least the second half of the episode.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
So they did a really good job of sort of like how the story unfolded,
Right.
kudos to the writers. They did a great job with it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's good.
All
So,
right, so let's get into our breakdown of the episode. We'll do our
mhm.
timestamps and talk about the show.
All right. So right off the bat, we start off with our flashback of the episode, which is young Sean and Henry. Sean is running from a bully, and Henry makes him find a new approach to dealing with the bully. So Sean tells this bully, "Hey, he notices his math grade, and he says, 'Hey, you're failing math. I can help you ace the next test. The teacher has a pattern. Every third answer is C.'" And so Henry overhears this conversation, and now he's already what I notice here is that he has already thrown Sean into the bully. Like he's been like, "Go deal with it. You're not going to hide inside. Go deal with this bully." But now he's making it even worse because Sean's way of dealing with the bully was to help him pass the test. And now Henry calls the teacher to tell him Sean knows the pattern. So now the kid's he's like basically thrown his kid to the wolves in this episode, which
Yeah,
is a very
Sean,
Henry thing to do.
brilliant plan is gonna fail now, and yeah, it's
Mhm.
definitely that was an interesting thing when whenever he went out to talk to the bully. I thought it was funny because so Sean walks out past the fence and he talks to the bully. He sees in his backpack that he has the paper with an F on it. And like the first thing he asks the kid is, "You flunk in math?" And the kid's like, "Probably." Like he doesn't know. He says probably. I don't know the way that kid did it. It just really tickled me. I thought it was really funny the way that he's answered probably. Like he doesn't know, but he knows he's not doing great.
It's funny, my takeaway from this scene was, dude, Sean's life. It's no wonder he feels the way he feels about Henry because he had to be constantly on his toes. Can you imagine never being able to relax at all as a kid? You are
Mhm.
constantly having to notice how many hats are in a room and like how like your dad's basically going, "No, get back out there with the bully." And I'm going to sit here on the porch and watch, by the way. You just go ahead. It's
Oh
got to have
God.
been exhausting for him as a kid.
Yeah, in a later episode, we there's a little side scene that comes up where they talk about Easter egg hunts and how crazy his dad hid the Easter eggs around the yard, and like 22 years later, there's still two eggs he never found. Like, yeah, that's actually a really great point. Is how like on his toes and on point he had to be throughout his life.
Yeah.
It
He had
is
to be
definitely could be
exhausted, and,
exhausting.
like, by the time he was old enough, he's like, "I gotta get away from this." And, then at that point, it was just second nature for him, but, man, this was a great example of that. Crazy. Alright, so we are now at 1 minute, 47 seconds, and we're back at the psych office. Gus enters the psych office to find a woman at a desk, and he is very obviously confused. And once again, we find out that Sean has taken it upon himself to make a decision without Gus.
Mhm. And he hired a receptionist, not from a temp agency or from a receptionist like business that provides receptionists, but from a modeling agency, because it's very important that you have a model answering your phones and delegating paperwork.
Of course.
hmm And then we also find out that the model doesn't do any work. She
Mhm,
also doesn't speak any English. She just
mhm.
sits there and looks pretty.
Yeah.
And Gus is a little bit unsure about how he feels about that.
Yes. Now, Gus also in this scene tells Sean that a doctor that his pharmaceutical company supplies to was killed. So Sean's interest is piqued. He's like ready to dive in. He's like, "This is what we do. We have to get on the case." And so yeah, so then as they're leaving, that's when he discovers and that she doesn't speak that the new receptionist doesn't speak any English. And I love what Sean said. Did you catch he's like, "Does she
Does
need
she need
to?"
to?
Like like does it matter?
Mhm.
Um and so they head off and they're going to try and, insert themselves in the case again. And I loved that moment where they were going across the street and Sean looked at Juliet and he tells Gus, he goes, "Look how cute she is in the fuchsia." It was so cute. She had a little pink, shirt on. "Look how cute
Mhm.
she is in the fuchsia." I love the two of them. Anyway, yeah.
Well, they arrive at the crime scene where they have Juliet and Lester. Sean makes a joke and has a vision that connects him to the dead guy. And Lassiter tells him to leave, but Juliet ends up letting them in after Lassiter steps away. She gives him the little nod and like
You gotta love
lifts up
that.
the crime scene tape and lets him in. So I thought that was a fun little moment where they're building up that rapport again.
Uh-huh.
And that happens a couple times in this episode where she references them. She's like, "Hey, we should call Sean. He knows what's
Uh-huh.
going on."
Love it.
Also, the when they get to the crime scene, Lassiter sees them, sees that Juliet let them in, and he approaches them again, and he's telling them to not interfere with the investigation. And I do notice that in his wording and the tone of his voice, his vibe in this scene is different than before. It's almost like he's not telling them to leave so they don't solve the case, or mm, it's almost like he's telling them to leave so they don't solve the case before him, rather than telling them to leave so they don't like get in the way or hinder the investigation.
Mhm.
I don't know, just there's the way he said it. It's not necessarily what he said. It's just how
His
his acting
tone.
was when he was telling them that, which was like, so do not interfere with my investigation. I'm going to solve this
Mhm.
before you is almost what I was hearing. So I do feel like that conflict between them in this first couple episodes is gone now. And
Mhm.
like last episode, it was a little bit closer to home for him, but I still, even though he got aggravated at some points, it didn't seem like it was like hate or annoyance. It was more of just like their silliness, like their rapport is starting.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think that we're past angry Lassiter now for good,
Mm.
and
Well, it's
hopefully he
almost
doesn't
like
come back.
now he realizes they're not going anywhere.
Right? Yeah, he's
Like, okay,
accepting them,
it's
and
yeah.
he almost, I think he has to recognize that they're also doing a good job, regardless of whether he wants to admit it. They're not hindering the investigation; they are helping.
Right.
So I think that is part of it as well.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to ever admit it. I do
Yeah,
like though when he tells them to leave the crime scene or he will have them arrested and he says, "Am I clear?" And Sean says, "Like butter."
I have that too. All right, so I dug deeper into this.
Okay.
So yeah, so during it he says, "Am I clear?" And then Sean says, "Like butter," and it gives him this really weird. And Laster has this look like where he pauses for a second. And at first, I'm not familiar with that, so I thought it was some kind of callback to like an '80s movie or something like that. So I looked it up, and the first reference or the first thing I found was that clarified butter is a thing,
Yes,
from the Land Flakes website.
it's what
When
you
you
dip lobster in, honey.
Well, I didn't know it was called clarified butter. So are you
Okay.
clear like butter?
Uh-huh.
When you clarify butter, you remove all the milk solids and water, but are left with the butter fat. This creates a higher smoking point, which makes clarified butter ideal for cooking and sautéing, from the Land of Lakes website. And this is also a reference to a Michael Myers sketch called Coffee Talk, where that phrase was used with his character.
Yeah, he did that on SNL all the time when
Mhm.
he was on there.
Yep.
Very funny.
So I learned a couple things
Yeah,
this episode
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Mm.
Lobster, clarified butter. Yummy.
I don't eat lobster, so I
Oh, I'm so sorry for you.
mm,
I'm so sorry for
mm.
you. Really, I am. Okay, 5 minutes and
Sea
36
rats.
seconds. 5 minutes and 36 seconds. A client has come into the office. Sean, and he tells Sean and Gus that he's being haunted. Now is where we get Gus's interest peaked, and he makes Sean take the case. They do. There's a little interaction in here. They are going back and forth through text. There's a lot of texting in this episode, so they're going back and forth through text. Sean and Gus about Gus wants to take the case. Sean doesn't. He's like he's not being haunted. Whatever. So
Right. So,
yeah,
so the guy that comes in, his name's Robert. He's actually a guest star for. I think his name is pronounced Frank Whaley, and he's been in tons of stuff. I checked out his IMDb page, and yeah, he's been in everything. I've seen him several times just on shows that I watch, not including all the stuff that he's been in I've never heard of.
yeah.
So yeah, he was actually a good actor too in this one. He portrayed it very well.
He is a major character actor. Like, I could not believe when I looked at his list of credits. Like,
Mhm.
ridiculous. He's in everything.
But one thing I think was really funny about this scene is something that we get into or that we see regularly throughout the show, where Gus, who strangely enough, who's very intelligent, has all this
Mhm.
facts and information, is just really well read and well rounded. He believes in the supernatural. He
Yes.
believes in ghosts and spirits and hauntings, and he gets anytime this stuff comes up in future episodes, he's like super psyched, and Sean is
Mhm.
like, "Let's boot this guy. He's crazy. There's no such thing." So I think that's a funny character quirk for Gus, is that
It's
he's into the supernatural, even though it's illogical.
it's also so ironic because here is, like, Sean trying to portray himself as a psychic, but
Right.
he wants nothing to do with any of it.
Hmm.
It is funny. It is funny. So now we see Gus breaking out his ghost finding equipment with Sean. Sean is impressed, tells Gus though that ghosts are not real, but I was cracking up at the equipment.
Hmm. Well, I have something about that in the next scene when we're at the guy's house. That
Okay.
this is the part where I was cracking up. I loved it.
I think we probably have the same note, but let's see what happens.
So in this part, we get the scene where after Gus or Sean sees how into this Gus is, he sees all his gear and he sees how hyped he is. Sean is curious as to what spawned this. Why does Gus believe in the supernatural?
That's when
And
Gus starts talking
yeah,
about when he was 12 years old. And he says, I was 12 and I heard a ghost talking through the walls.
and this is a very intense story that he's telling. Like Dule Hill killed it in the scene where he's
He
talking
looked
about something that
emotional.
moved him. Yeah, he was very emotional. This moved him. He never told anybody this story before,
Uh-huh.
and it kind of formed who he is and what he believes.
He was all in on this scene. He was all in.
Yeah, he
And
heard a voice in the walls growing up, and he's telling him like he has this intense story. He remembers it word for word. Like, my name is Wilting Flower, and I died here many years ago.
it was an
Like this
Indian
whole
burial
Indian
ground.
burial ground story. And Sean interrupts him in the middle of his, and he recites it word for word what Gus was about to say, and Gus is very confused, and he's like, "I never. How did you know that? I never told anybody that."
Sean admits that he put a walkie-talkie into the wall when when his dad was redoing the insulation. And then-
And Gus is questioning life
oh my
for a
god.
split second, like
That
what's real. Oh
that
God.
was a funny, funny scene in this one. That was really good. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and,
He was just so serious. Gus was
he
so
was
serious in this scene, and when Sean revealed that like 30 years ago he tricked him, oh God, I
yep.
love that. That was
And
so good.
right after they talk about that, like, they're still in that conversation, and Sean says he got the idea of the burial ground from Poltergeist or Gremlins, which those are some 80s references, both really, really popular movies in the 80s, so,
Hmm.
yeah.
But in this scene, so in this scene, it's after the theme song plays out.
Mhm,
We see like while they're having this talk about like Sean's explaining to it, Gus is telling him how he's interested or how he got into the supernatural. You can see the receptionist in the background, like on the couch, just sitting there the entire time listening to this conversation. She doesn't speak English. She has no idea what they're saying, but
mhm.
she's just chilling back there. I thought it was really funny because I don't know, she's just like her sitting back there while they're just going about their life as just like this like set piece. I thought was funny. I don't know.
Mhm.
It that got me. Mm.
All right, so next we are at the police station, and Lassie's online. He is ordering these things called darling figurines, which I will add are not very cute. But he's ordering them for his ex-wife, and he tells the person over the phone that he wants the card to say X, EX is the loneliest letter in the alphabet. And it got me because here's where we're starting to see Lassie's personality. He's so trying to
Mm.
get his ex-wife back.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of cute to see him try and be like this because he's so like I don't know, like all the time he's got that guarded sort of thing going on. It was
Mhm.
really nice to see
Very
that
stern.
sort of part of his personality.
I agree. I thought this was an excellent way, especially with him on the phone talking to the guy and then what
Mhm.
he was saying. You know, this falls under like exposition for like a movie or TV show where they're just telling us stuff without us seeing it on screen. But I thought this was a very clever way to give exposition
Mhm.
where it didn't feel lazy or cheap. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just, like, scrolling text on a screen telling us the whole story, and then now we know what's going on. Like, I thought it was a very clever way to do it, and I also thought that it was a very romantic gesture.
Yeah.
Like, it was good. Like, he put thought into it.
He was
It was
trying.
clever. He really was trying to do something kind. So,
Hmm.
I do think this was a great little, like, 15 seconds or 20 seconds of backstory for Laster that really helps build up something about him.
Well, a little
And,
bit of time
yeah.
that told a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good.
At 11 minutes in, Juliet comes into the scene after Lassiter gets off the phone with the figurine guy. And before she says anything, she visually has a complete different vibe that I wanted to talk about. I think I actually mentioned this in maybe the episode before last, but she had this very disheveled look before, and now she's got like her pantsuit on. She's got the pink shirt that's like got the nice collar. Her hair looks different. Like she looks professional and she looks confident. And with that visual change, you can also see it not only right now in this scene, but later throughout the episode as well. Her tone and relationship with Lassiter seems different. It seems more professional. They've been working together for some time. She's questioning herself less, and she sees herself as more of an equal to Lassiter than just a subordinate. So I thought that was like an immediately noticeable vibe that we got from Juliet just walking into the scene.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think she's sort of starting to come into her own and like realize that she does not always have to back down to him
Yeah.
and kind of like, utilize that confidence. Like it, but so I get it.
hmm
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
It's
sure.
definitely seeming more like everybody's in their characters now. It doesn't seem
Hmm.
like anybody's straggling behind anymore. Everybody's in place, and I'm really interested in that.
Hmm.
Um, so yep. But shortly after that, at 11 minutes 30 seconds, the guys go to Robert's house. They're the client and the guy who thinks he's being haunted. And we see Gus with his utility belt
You
of
and I
ghost
had the
hunting
same note.
supplies
We had the same note about
over
this.
top. Like the belt is over top of his suit jacket. And when I saw that, I started dying. I had to
I
rewind
paused
it and
it.
like watch it again.
I paused it and laughed like I was cracking up at the belt over the suit.
It was so funny. And in this scene, the guys go into Robert's house and
Mhm.
Sean is talking to Robert. He's interviewing him, asking him questions, like getting him
Mhm.
to show him things. And the entire time that they're talking, you see Gus walking back and forth in the background, like scanning stuff. He has his camera out, this like big
He's
thermal
looking
camera,
for cold
and he's
spots.
looking around. You hear like beeping from all the monitors that he has running. Like he's fully into he doesn't even care what they're saying. He's fully into looking for ghosts at this place. And yeah, that whole scene between the jacket with the belt over top of it and him walking around, I was dying. I loved this scene. This was
When he
my
finds
favorite part
he
of the whole
finds the cold
episode.
spot and Sean's like, "Yeah, we're under a vent." Like, you are imagining this, dude.
This was definitely my favorite like scene from the whole episode. I loved it.
So, next there, Robert has started crying. He's, like, upset. "Why are they doing this to me?" I was dying that Sean
Oh
and Gus
yes.
were doing rock, paper, scissors to figure out who was gonna comfort him.
So yeah, building the scene. So Robert's got his heads in his hands and he's like crying into his hands. So he can't see what's going on around him. But then he has Sean and Gus on either side who both have this like silent conversation, this psychic
Huh?
conversation where they're like, we know that somebody needs to comfort him, but neither of us want to do it. And they're like pointing at him like, you do it, you do it. And then they have rock, paper, scissors and they do 3 rounds while he's like crying in his hands, and then Gus ends up losing and has to like sit down next to him and pat his shoulder. But it was a fantastic scene that was so Sean and Gus at their core. It
Was
was great. I loved
it
it.
was so best friends because
Yes.
you okay, probably everybody who's listening has a friend that they can silently communicate with, even just a look on your face. And
hmm
this is like speaks so much to their friendship. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
That was another great scene.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, definitely, it's good for them.
So now at 15:34, Sean and Gus have decided to go ahead and stay at Robert's house overnight. Sean has told Gus he thinks it's an ex-girlfriend haunting Robert, but they have to make it look psychic.
Mhm.
So, he can't just, go out with this information already. They've got to make it look like he's psychically found this out. So he says, meanwhile, I'm going to do some sit-ups. Come hold my feet.
I'm going to do 1,000.
I'm going to do 1,000. I thought that was so random.
And I think one of the few times that Sean references exercise.
Yeah, that doesn't happen often. Usually he wants to skip that.
Yep. Yeah, usually he it's not a normal part of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Next, at 16 minutes, the guys are in his house and they wake up to the house being on fire. Like a fire is in the living room where they're sleeping, and they end up putting the fire out. They get Robert out there, and Gus checks the entire house, and he tells us that the doors are all locked and the windows are all closed and locked from the inside. So they're very confused. And when Gus is telling him this, Sean sees on Gus's forehead that there are lipstick marks, like somebody kissed Gus's forehead with lipstick. And this is also a confusing clue. They're not sure what's going on, and it's seeming very supernatural at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the next clues that we got from that scene.
So now cut to Lassie and Jules. They are they're out kind of looking for clues about solving the doctor's murder. And Juliet compliments Lassie. He gives her an idea. Hey, let's canvass the whole area or whatever, see if anyone saw this person. And Jules compliments him. He says, that she says, that was a great idea. That was so smart. And he looks at her and was like, are you being sarcastic? She said, no, it was a little bit awkward because they sort of were being nice to each other, and they almost didn't even know how to react to the fact that they were being nice to each other. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that? Like their reactions to it were like, I don't know how to take you, I mean, it was definitely different for sure. Yeah. So while they're walking around, Sean and Gus see them. They're in the blueberry
where they were on like equal footing though. Again, like it seemed like they were partners, not like she wasn't a subordinate or like a student. So
right.
It was a good moment.
For sure. So in that same scene, while they're walking around, Sean and Gus pull up in the blueberry and they roll the window down, and Sean says to Lassiter, I know you have the same note about this.
Go for it.
Sean says to Lassiter, you guys selling tickets to the policeman's ball? And Lassie says, we don't have balls. It was just one more way for Sean to get at him.
And he totally planned it. He totally knew that Lassiter was going to say something like that.
Of course.
And Lassie just fell right into it. He fell right into it.
He did. And his face afterward.
There's an awkward pause there.
Yeah. It was like, he just did it. He did. You notice when Sean does these things, Lassiter never wants to acknowledge that he's done it. He just gets this look in his face.
Yeah, and everybody sees it. Nobody says it.
Right. Oh, so good. So good.
Oh man. Yeah. So at this one, we're at 1840 now, and Lassiter says, "Mr. Spencer, need I remind you what happens when you interfere with a police investigation?" And again, right after the policeman ball thing, Sean retorts with, "The case gets solved," and Sean lights up, and I love it. Or he lights him up, and I thought it was great. Like he got 2 zingers, like within a minute. It was fantastic. And when they pulled away, whenever they pull away from them on the street, Sean says, "Bye, Juliet," in his like cute little like flirty way, and he doesn't acknowledge Lassiter at all. I like it.
It was good.
This is a funny little detail.
That was a funny little scene. That was like one of the funniest parts of the episode, I think.
Well, because it was all about them.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the actual case. Like this is one of those things where it's kind of there was a lot more case this time than then. We had a few silly moments, but I think we passed most of them at this point. I think we're almost at the halfway point, and it's mostly about the case from now on.
Yep. I love the next scene at 19 minutes 24 seconds. Now, right before this, they were in the car. Gus has been telling Sean he's got to get to work. He's already missed 2 days this week. Well, at this scene at 19 minutes 24 seconds, which shows Sean driving and Gus is waking up. He's He wakes up to find out that Sean drugged him with allergy pills and drove him from well, how many hours to
I
San
think it was like
Francisco?
2 or 3 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the way to San Francisco. He's so mad. And what I noticed here is that in the background is Wake Me Up Before You Go Go playing on the radio by
I
Wham.
didn't even notice that. That was good.
Oh, it was perfect. It was perfect song to be playing. So yeah, I've started to pay attention after the Stacy's mom. I've started to
Mhm.
pay attention to what are they listening to in the car because this is going to go along with what they're talking about. So yeah, the Wake Me Up Before You Go Go is on. That was another '80s reference with Wham. But Gus won't talk to Sean at this point. He says, "I'm not talking to you." So they get to the house of the ex-girlfriend, Robert's ex-girlfriend, and Gus. They literally open the door. Or well, she opens the door. Sean pretty much takes one look at her and says, "We don't need to talk to you," and he walks away. So I thought it was funny here that because Sean or Gus is not talking to him, Gus starts texting Sean across the street. Like he will
Mhm.
not speak to him, but he is texting him. He is like, "Get in there. We're going to go talk to this lady."
Mhm.
So they do go inside and talk to her. Then we leave that scene and we're back at the police station. So at 2112, and there's kind of a lot going on here. This sort of breaks in between another scene with Sean and Gus, but I think it's worth mentioning. So at 2112, Lassie is back at the police station and he has gotten a box with the figurines from his wife.
Mhm.
And there's a note saying separation means separated. And Lassie's clearly not happy. Like you can tell he's like hurt by it. But being Lassie, he doesn't want to be like all, sappy.
Mhm.
And so Jules comes over and he gets kind of mean with her. And after their last interaction, she has like the guts to say, "Are you just kidding?" And he says, "Yes, of course." And he like lets her out of it. He doesn't keep being mean to her. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Mhm.
Definitely worth a mention, that scene.
Yeah, he told her to keep your ideas to yourself or something. Something along those
Uh-huh.
lines where they were talking about going to meet with Sean, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, like he recognized that I'm at work now, and my work does involve talking to other people. So like he corrected itself when she gave him the opportunity. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
That's
I did
good.
feel bad for him again because it wasn't
Yeah.
like some like empty gesture. Like he didn't just like send flowers or like send her a gift card or something. Like he actually
Mhm.
thought of something and put effort into it. And yeah, I felt
He
bad for that.
tried so hard and then
Yeah.
he just like you could tell he was hurt. I didn't
Mhm.
I didn't love that.
But at 24 minutes around that point, we're back with Sean and Gus in the car. Um, this is after Sean drugged uh, Gus and got him to come and check out the ex-girlfriend of Robert, the client. They pull up. They get there after their like 2 hour, 3 hour drive. Sean knocks on the door. The ex answers. Sean immediately says it's not her, and then starts to leave to drive back to get on that 2 hour drive back home. And Gus is still upset with him because he drugged him, but he he doesn't want to talk to him, so he texts him instead. Like Sean, he's literally across the street. He could just speak out and say something, but he texted him and said, "We're not leaving. We just drove 2 hours. Talk to her anyways." And he's like, "The lipstick print on your head doesn't match her lips. It's not her." And Gus is like, "Talk to her anyways." So they go in and actually talk to her, and they do find some useful information. They find out that she left Robert because Robert cheated on her. One of her friends saw Robert in a club, and even though she saw him and actually spoke to him, um, whenever his ex brought it up, he kept denying it. And her friend said that he introduced himself as Martin Brody, which was a reference to a character from the movie Jaws, and that was his favorite movie. So I don't know. It was a very
Did you
confusing thing for her.
did you catch though in that scene when he said, "That's the name of Adam Brody's character in Jaws," and she goes, "How did you know?" And he goes, "I've
I've seen
seen the
Jaws.
movie."
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it was a weird thing, yeah.
so
Also,
sarcastic. "I've seen the movie?" It was
in that
good.
introduction, to the character, or in that, undercover interview, they introduced themselves as, like, somebody from, like, an art exhibit or an art museum, and they listed her or Robert listed her as a character reference. So, this gives Gus an opportunity to go undercover, surprisingly, because you can see it on his face. Sean was shocked whenever Gus started talking,
Mhm.
but, um, Gus went in with a French accent out of nowhere.
When he
It was
started
very
talking
confusing
when he started talking like that, it was really awful. So I don't
and
know.
unnecessary.
It was completely unnecessary. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but when he tries to do stuff like that, it just comes off so wrong. Just
Mhm.
that's funny. Um, all right. So after that, they travel back to Santa Barbara. They're in the parking lot of the psych office, and they're sitting in the Blueberry. And this is at about what 24 minutes, 20 seconds. And Sean looks over and sees a car coming straight for them, and tells Gus, "We need to move." So he backs the little Blueberry up, and the person who tried to hit them with the car runs from the scene. Sean's checking things out in the car, and he sees a toothpick in the car. Um, and so yeah, so there was
Another clue.
yeah, they've got another clue. Yeah. Next up, they go back to Robert's house, and they find a mirror with a message written on it. And Gus thinks it's blood. He Sean touches it. He says it's not blood. And Gus goes, "Enjoy your hepatitis." I love it. And so anyway, they follow this trail of what turns out to be paint to a ladder that they find outside. Now, can I just say that couple notes about this scene? First, if you find a ladder outside leading up to something so small like that, don't crawl up it. Like
Like
in
an
my
attic.
mind, I'm looking at that going, no, no, don't go up there. Don't go up there. But they did it anyway. And also, did you notice that Gus is in like a t-shirt, like a plain
It's
t-shirt?
hard not to notice. It's a pink T-shirt
I
with no
just
collar, no jacket.
usually Gus is more dressed up in that. I think probably you could count on your one hand the amount of times you see Gus in something like this.
I don't. Yeah, I can't even think of another time where he's in just a T-shirt like this.
It was I don't know. I thought it was just very it was in your face kind of.
Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
obvious. It almost
I
seemed
mean,
like a different character. Like it seemed
mhm.
out of character.
Yes.
And yeah, it was a little bit. I don't know, jarring. Seems like a little intense, but it
Yeah.
definitely stood out, and I noticed it the entire time. I'm
Yeah, he's
curious if
usually so
somebody new
buttoned
to
up.
the show would notice it. This is the first time that we see him in a T-shirt
Uh-huh.
in the show. So it's possible that somebody new might not notice this at all, or might
Yeah,
not think it
very
is weird.
possibly.
But after seeing 8 seasons of him dressed to nicer, seeing him in a T-shirt for like the first time is very
It was
strange.
weird. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Okay.
At 29 minutes 30 seconds, we have that. So the guys found this attic on the house, and when they go up the ladder, um, they're looking around, and it looks like a living room, like somebody's like living up there almost. Although they do see that this is very specifically like a woman's apartment or something.
Mhm.
There's makeup everywhere. There's a bunch of like fancy clothes on a rack. There's like a big makeup mirror
Bunch of
and a bunch
heels.
of like perfumes and stuff like that. So it definitely seems like it's a woman's like living space. And they're confused. Specifically Gus. He's like, is this where the ghost lives? Like he's still hooked on a ghost.
Mhm.
But um a couple things that do stand out is the lipstick, which was what kissed Gus's head. And then they also made a note earlier in the episode that there was red hairs all over the place, and over by the makeup stand, there's a red wig. So they're
Mhm.
starting to piece this together, or Sean is at least, and they figured out that they want to bring up. Robert to see what he says, because Sean has this idea that Robert is one of those people with a multiple personality disorder,
Mhm.
and he thinks that Robert is essentially changing to a woman without knowing it, and that would account for some of his blackouts. That would account for the lipstick, the house being locked from the inside, but
Mhm.
like the fire starting. It would make sense.
And
And
also
Gus
in
isn't convinced.
also in this scene, Sean notices a book, um, like a date book,
Oh yeah, the
and
address.
he notices that there is an appointment with the doctor who was murdered in the date book,
Mhm.
and it was crossed through. Now, if we also think back to when Sean and Gus pulled up and talked to Lassie and Jules, they were holding a case file with the name Regina on it.
Mhm.
And Sean decides to see if Robert is in fact also Regina.
Mhm.
So they use that
Yeah,
room to kind of go, let's bring Robert up here and see if anything up here sort of wakes Regina up. And
triggers the other personality,
right.
yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
they start talking to him as Regina, they spray some, like, scents that Regina was using, they put some of Regina's clothes on her, and, that eventually triggers it. Regina
Mhm.
has a soft spot for Gus because Gus comforted Robert whenever he was freaking out, so
Mhm.
there was that little tie-in to the previous scene.
Mhm. Hold on. Back up to 36. Okay, so we take a little break from the scene at with Robert, and we're back at the police station. And here's Lassie with his little figurines, lining them up, and then he uses them for target practice.
Yep.
And when Jules asks him what he's doing, he says, "Shooting relaxes me." I love that.
I can relate. It
I
would be
know.
so cool to have a
I
gun
know.
range in the basement of your work. Oh, that'd be so cool. That
Yeah.
would be awesome. Just anytime
Yep.
you want to, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
At 37 minutes, we are back with Sean and Gus. They've left Robert's house, and he's thinking back over all the evidence with the new information that they have about Robert and his multiple personalities and Regina. And during their talk with Regina, they did also find that there was another personality, at least one more, that they didn't have details on, but Regina knew that there was another one. Regina was seeing Dr. Blinn, who was the victim that Lassiter and Juliet are investigating. And they also know that the two cases are connected now because of Regina. After checking the crime scene photos and his memory, he remembers seeing the chewed up toothpicks at the first crime scene of the doctor's office, as well as inside of the passenger or the driver's side of the car that tried to run into them. So he now knows that whoever was at the doctor's office and killed the doctor is probably the one who tried to kill them, or at least somehow related
Mhm.
to this scenario. Sean then remembers Martin Brody whenever he was talking to the ex girlfriend, and he thinks that maybe Martin Brody is that other alternate reality or
Mhm.
that alternate personality. So we got a lot of information, a lot of things that didn't make sense before now make sense knowing about Regina
Yep,
and
Sean
Robert's
has
condition.
he's put it all together, and now he starts to solve the case, and it very dramatically, I might add, his usual Sean Spencer-esque performance of, throwing himself around the room and everything. So he starts to solve the case. Lassie and Jules actually buy it completely, and they head off to the new doctor's office, because Sean noticed on that date book that now Regina has a doctor's appointment with another
Dr. Drake.
psychologist, Dr. Drake.
Although there was
Mhm.
one other detail that we found.
Uh-huh.
When Sean went back to the police station to have another like psychic episode to connect their cases together,
Mhm.
Juliet left him at the desk to go find Lassiter, and at his desk he saw Regina Kane's medical patient file, and he was able to
Mhm.
read that, and he found out that Regina, the female alternate personality of Robert, was looking into getting the sex change procedure, And that not only affects Regina, but also Robert and Martin Brody, the other
Mhm.
personality. And he deduced from this that that's what's going on. The other personality must have found out about the procedure, found out that it was going to affect him having the surgery, and that's why all this is happening. Is that that Martin Brody personality is trying to stop that
Mhm.
from happening? So he killed the doctor, hoping that that would prevent Regina from continuing with the surgery.
So
And this
now
also
they're
means that the new doctor is in danger.
exactly. So now they are headed off to the new doctor's office to hopefully stop anything from happening at that, to that doctor. They get there right when they need to, and tackle Martin just as he's about to kill the new doctor.
Mhm. They get to the office, yeah, just in time, and they save the day.
Hmm.
Um, Everybody's captured. I am curious how they would handle the case. I guess he wouldn't go to necessarily jail. He'd go to like a psych ward.
Well,
I
they
would like
did
to have
no,
seen
they
more
they did
closure on
tell
that.
us. They did tell us. In the next scene when they're back at the psych office, Gus tells Sean, "This is so cool. They Robert's going to whatever facility it was." And he said, "Sean, don't you know that's the best psychiatric facility in the country or something like or in the area?" So yeah, they did say that
Oh, okay.
he
I
was
must have
going to
missed
a
that.
yeah, they did
Okay.
say that. And also in this scene, this kind of closes the show. There is a new temp from the modeling agency. Only this time
Leslie.
it's Leslie, but Leslie is a guy. And Sean is clearly not happy with that. So he fires him very fittingly through a text.
And he
Um,
says before he fires him, he even says, like, "Gus, we have to fire him." And Gus is like, "We can't.
Sexual discrimination.
yeah, it's discrimination. You can't just fire him because he's a guy." And he's like, "Dude, we can't get any action if this guy is up there who looks better than both of us put together." Like, like I just thought that was a funny little scene before they ended it. But yeah, he
Yeah.
fires him through text, and that concludes the episode.
All right. So now we go into some notable points. I did not really have an yeah moment. What did you have one, Matt?
I loved it when Gus and Sean first went to Robert's house and Gus had on his utility belt over his suit jacket. That really killed me, and that was my "oh yeah" moment.
Okay.
I loved that
Um,
one.
how about Come On Son? Anything there?
I did. So for me, I don't know if this quite fits the context of our "Come on, son" moment, but I felt bad for Lassiter when his wife sent the Marines back, the
Yeah.
figurines back. We did kind of talk about this already in the show, but that was my "Come on, son" moment. Was I don't know, just felt really bad for him
I
when she
actually
sent it back.
I completely agree with you about that being a Come On Son moment. I didn't have that noted, but you're talking about it and I think it fits it extremely well.
Mhm.
What about a wait for it moment?
Wait for it. I wanted to find out more about Lassiter's wife, and I'm hoping that we get
Mhm,
more tidbits like this about their relationship, about I don't know, maybe more about why they broke up. I mean, you can kind of infer some things just based on what we know about how she responded and his
mhm,
personality. He was probably too uptight and overbearing for her, or something along those lines. But I'm curious to know more about their relationship as well. So
mhm.
that would be my wait for this episode.
And we have some Henry lessons here. For me it was more, fix your problem by figuring out a better way to deal with it. Like that's what I
Mhm.
got. But what
I
about
saw
you?
it more as like facing your problem. Like you can only run away from it for so long, and
Mhm.
the longer you wait, or the more you keep trying to handle it the same way over and over again, the you're not going to have any changes, and it's just going to be a worse outcome. So if you can't run away from something, fix it. And sometimes you have to get creative with how you do it.
Okay.
Um, we didn't
Yeah.
have any Henry moments this time, so
No.
none of us got those. There
Sadly.
was a few. I don't know if it really counts as the '80s guest star, but Frank Whaley was in a tons of stuff, and he
Mhm.
started acting in 1987. So I mean, he has
Yeah.
120 acting credits on IMDb starting from '87. So
Yeah, he was
maybe an
definitely on some
'80s
80s
reference,
stuff.
maybe not. but
So other
uh,
80s
yeah.
references, we had a lot of movie references this time.
Mhm.
Poltergeist, Gremlins, Jaws, Wham, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. There are quite a few.
Yep.
Uh quite a few of those. And then the "Where's the pineapple" moment, I had to look it up.
I had to as well.
It was so this was a hard one to see. We had the open box of pizza at Robert's house with pineapple chunks on it. And in Regina's hideaway, the little attic place, there's a pineapple-shaped perfume bottle on the makeup dresser. I did not notice any of them in the episode.
This was a weak one. I don't know what the intention was. I went back whenever I read that, I went back to the episode and I
Mhm,
skimmed through those scenes. In like before the fire, when they're in Robert's apartment, you can see an open pizza box on the table behind Sean,
mhm,
but you can't see what's on it. I mean, you don't see anything red like the pepperonis or any kind of meat, so it's possible there's pineapple in there, but pineapple kind of matches the color of cheese. It's not overtly obvious that that's the pineapple.
mhm.
And then I also went back to Regina's little attic apartment thing, and I didn't see anything in there that resembled a pineapple. There was one that kind of had like the print of like the pineapple what scales or like that pattern on it,
The
but it was a
skin
pink
on it?
bottle
Mm.
and it also had no crown. So like
Huh,
it didn't really look like a pineapple from what I could tell. So I
yeah.
don't know. Somebody might have dropped the ball this episode, maybe. Maybe it was
Disappointing
supposed to be the
pineapple.
pizza, but it was a weak one.
Disappointing pineapple.
Hmm.
Silly nicknames for Gus. Francois?
Yep, but also not a favorite. It's kind of a weak one.
No, it was
Like this
weak
this
too.
episode wasn't quite on point with all the normal references, but
Yeah.
mhm. All right, Barb. So we've seen the episode, we've talked about it. How does it hold up over time being from 2006?
Um,
If we saw it
the
again today on TV.
mystery part of it, still good.
Mhm.
Good, like, plot-wise, still good. Not super special for me. I didn't this is not one of those episodes I look back and go, "Oh, that's one of my favorites," or, like, I get super excited when I know this one's the next one in the list I'm watching, or whatever the case may be, but it was a good episode overall. What
Yeah.
about you?
I thought it was a good episode, not amazing, not horrible. I definitely don't I wasn't bummed whenever it came up. Um I was still, interested in watching it. The only thing that dated it for me was again the technologies. There was a lot of cell phones in this episode, between
Uh-huh.
texting and whatnot, and the cell phones were very old. So
Yeah.
that was the big thing that really like that dated it for me and that stood out. And it's just because they used cell phones so often in the episode, beginning, middle, end. They had cell
Mhm.
phone use,
You know
so
what's
it
so
really just
funny
stood out.
though is you know what's so funny though is that your take on it is, "Oh, these cell phones were old." My take on that part was, "Well, they're texting."
Hmm.
Because that's what people do now. You like in the scene where they were in the office texting back and forth deciding whether or not to take the case. People do that now. You text across the room so nobody hears what you're saying. You're texting it. And they
Hmm.
were doing it even then. So
As
that
an
was kind
absurdity,
of
though.
cool. Yeah, but that was like it still relates now. So,
Hmm.
yeah, they were old phones, but at least they were texting. So, yeah. Food
Food mentions.
mentions? Anything?
Not really. At one point, they mentioned jerk chicken. But that's about it. There really wasn't food mentions. I guess you could count the pizza that was on the table, but they didn't even talk about that. That was just kind of in the scene. So yeah, not a lot of food discussion this
Yeah,
time. Like
I
a
didn't
lot of their
notice any.
silliness wasn't in this episode.
Yeah, I noticed none. Oh, wait. Did they talk okay, what did he put the pills in? The allergy pills in a Frosty? Did he say a Frosty?
I don't remember.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
remember. It,
I
it was
thought he
probably
said it was
something
a
I got
Frosty.
wrong.
I don't know, I could be wrong. I'll have to go back and reference that, but
Mhm.
but yeah, okay. So I didn't mention anything else. So I guess that's it. The wrapping up this episode 7. On the next episode, we're going to be discussing season 1, episode 8, which is called Sean versus the Red Phantom.
I liked this one. I definitely remember this one. So I'm looking forward to this next episode. Definitely. Check us out on our Facebook group. It's We Know You Know a podcast about psych. You do have to search it specifically like that.
You can also catch us on Instagram at the Psych Podcast.
Or you can email us at our Gmail account, thepsychpodcast@gmail.com. No underscores or dots.
Yeah, we hope to hear from you guys, and keep listening.
Yes, again, thank you guys for listening. We're doing so great with the podcast, and it makes us even more excited to keep recording episodes. We do want, again, more fan interaction. Share this episode or share the podcast with your friends who you think might be interested or that you want to get into psych. Maybe talking about it will get them more interested in the show if they've never seen it before. And keep checking in.
We also hope to hear from you guys about maybe like what your favorite episodes of Psych are in season one. You can leave us notes about like what, anything you'd specifically like to hear us talk about. But any favorite episodes, definitely post that stuff on our social media. We would love to hear from you. And thank you so much again for listening. Have a great week, everybody.
Have a great week.